They say grief rewrites the rules of reality, but nothing prepared me for how far it would twist the world I thought I knew. When my mother died, it was as if the floor vanished beneath my feet. I had just turned 26, caught up in the soft edges of a life I thought was finally settling into place, planning a future with my fiancé, Mason, just a few blocks from the house I grew up in. Then the call came, quiet and cruel, just past 2 a.m. My father's voice on the line cracked into 2 words that cleaved everything in half: she's gone. The funeral blurred by in shades of black and casseroles. Relatives I barely remembered embraced me with fragile sympathy. But what etched itself into my memory was my father's hand clutching mine at the graveside, tight, desperate, like he was anchoring himself to the last living piece of her. They'd been inseparable since high school, 30 years together. I couldn't even begin to grasp the magnitude of what he'd lost. In the weeks after, I found myself stopping by his house more and more. At first, it was just to check in, to make sure he ate, maybe straighten a room or two. Then I started doing laundry there again, cooking meals, filling the silence. The house was the same, but without her, it felt like a museum, clean, quiet, and void of warmth. A shell. 3 weeks. After the burial, I dropped by with a bag of groceries. I was organizing things in the fridge when Dad came into the kitchen. His face was solemn, his voice low. "Jessica," he said, in that tone he only used when something mattered. "I need to ask you something important." I turned. "Sure. What's going on?" "I want you to move back in, just for a little while." I blinked. "Wait. What? Why?" He sighed, eyes tired and hollow. "The silence in this house is unbearable. I can't sleep. I eat alone, wake up to nothing. I don't know how to be without her." There was something in his face I hadn't seen, not even at the cemetery. Not just grief. It was raw loneliness. It broke something in me. I swallowed hard. "Okay," I said softly. "But just for a little while." Mason understood mostly. He hesitated but didn't protest. "If this helps him heal," he said, "then do what you need to do. Just don't lose yourself in it, Jess." So I packed a bag and returned to the house where I became who I was. My old bedroom hadn't changed. Faded band posters still clung to the walls, and my creaky twin bed greeted me like an old friend. It was strange but oddly soothing. For a while it felt manageable. I made dinner, we watched reruns of old sitcoms, and Dad even cracked a few smiles. It almost felt like healing, until the requests began. One night he asked if I'd sit in the living room while he drifted to sleep. "It just feels less empty when you're around," he murmured. I obliged, brushing it off as another symptom of grief. The next night, he handed me one of Mom's old robes. "She always wore this around the house," he said. You look just like her in it." Something in me recoiled, but I told myself it was just memory bleeding into mourning. People do strange things when they're shattered. But then came the night I walked into the kitchen and found him cradling one of her nightgowns, shoulders shaking. "You remind me of her," he whispered without turning. "Sometimes I pretend she's still here." His voice was hollow, wistful. When he turned, his eyes didn't quite meet mine, like he was caught between 2 realities. I didn't know whether to embrace him or walk away. I stayed. I comforted him. But something inside me had shifted. Then came the dinner. Spaghetti and meatballs. A meal we'd shared 1,000 times before. He buttered his bread with slow, deliberate motions, then looked up. "I've been thinking," he said. "About moving on." I smiled with relief. "That's good. Mom wouldn't want you to be alone forever. He nodded slowly. Exactly. I don't want someone new. I want someone who knows this home, who knows me. I frowned, puzzled. What do you mean? He reached across the table and took my hand, gently but too long. I want you to stay, he said. Not as my daughter, as my partner. The world stopped. I thought I'd misunderstood, heard him wrong. But then I saw his expression, the unsettling stillness in his eyes, the way his fingers lingered against mine. I snatched my hand back like it burned. No, I said sharply. Dad, that's not okay. He took it back almost immediately, claimed it was grief talking, that his mind was fractured, that he didn't mean any of it. I nodded, but deep down, I didn't believe him. That night, I called Mason. I told him everything. Jess, you need to get out of there, he said. Tonight. But I didn't leave. Not yet. Something inside me needed clarity. Closure. I had to understand what was really happening, what had truly taken root inside my father. The next morning, while he was out on his usual walk, I went into his room. I hadn't snooped in years, but desperation silences guilt. I opened his desk drawer. Inside, journals. A dozen or more stacked in chronological order, each dated. I flipped through them. Most entries were drenched in sorrow. He wrote endlessly about Mom, how the house had turned into a mausoleum, how silence had weight, how nights stretched like punishment. But then, the tone shifted. He began writing about me, about how I reminded him of her, about how maybe the universe had brought me back for a reason. One entry read, Jessica is the last flicker of light in this endless dark. Maybe she came back for more than just to help. Maybe this is fate trying to tell me something. My stomach churned. That night, I sat across from him and told him I was leaving. You need real help, Dad, I said. This isn't just grief anymore. It's something deeper, something warped. He didn't argue. For the first time in weeks, he looked truly defeated, but also strangely relieved. He nodded. You're right, he whispered. I've been lost. I left the next morning. Back to Mason. Back to something that resembled normalcy. That first night, I slept 12 straight hours. When I woke up, I cried, not from fear, but from mourning. I had lost both parents, in different ways. One to death, the other to something I still couldn't name. Weeks went by. Dad started therapy. He joined a support group. We stayed in touch, but I kept my distance. Carefully. Intentionally. Little by little, I watched him try. He replanted Mom's garden. Started cooking again, even. Made friends. It wasn't a transformation. It was a slow, fragile rebuilding. But it was real. And me? I learned that grief isn't just sadness. It's distortion. It can bend reality, make love possessive, twist memory into longing. But I also learned something harder. That sometimes the deepest act of love is walking. Away. Drawing a line. Saying no. I visit him once a week now. We talk about Mom. We laugh. Sometimes we cry. But we never mention that night. And we never will. Some truths are too heavy to carry aloud. Some boundaries once shattered can't be rebuilt, only acknowledged in silence. But healing is still possible, even when the past doesn't change, even when some things never will.